One more little story. Hey, by the way, that's Dave Weckl, by the way. It's a really cool recording. Let me start this thing. This will probably be my last antidote for today. I'm putting these things up, until I run out of things to put up. Hopefully around I won't, run out of things to say. But, I'm always thinking of something. What I hope already is that the suggestions that I give you guys help you, with your evolution and your playing and things to do with that. Now, this commentary has to do with any musician. I mean, whether you're a drummer, a guitar player, a horn player, a spoon player, Remember that? I used to play the spoons. I had like these wooden spoons, and I taped them together. It sounded pretty cool. It's on YouTube somewhere. I don't like to tell people about it. It was pretty cool. I did like a spoon and tap routine. By the way, I'm not really a great tap dancer, but kind of had some fun doing it. Rick from Drum Radio was kind of pecking on me about that. It was pretty cool. It's on YouTube somewhere. I'm not going to tell you where it is because I'm not really that good. But it was funny, it was fun. But what I wanted to suggest to you guys and girls and children of all ages, whoever you may be, wherever you may roam, make a habit of once in a while, you don't have to do it every day, listen to classical music. Now, there are a couple of there's one classical station out here where I live in New York. Forget what it is, it's at the end of the dial. But they play serious classical music. Now, the reason why I'm suggesting that, is in classical music, particularly like the big, the symphonic orchestral arranges, the percussion section usually consists of snare drum, sometimes two snare drum players, bass drum, mounted bass drum, timpani, a lot of times, chimes, and then what else? Xylophone, marimba, and sometimes tenor drums, many different sound effects. But what I'm suggesting about it is, and you have to find the right, the arrangements that have a lot of percussion in it. The reason I'm suggesting that is if you listen to the percussion parts and say like Aaron Copland's music, or I got this thing it was called Classical Thunder. I think it was Arthur Fiedler's orchestra. It had like the William Tell Overture. But you listen to the snare drum part in there, it's moving, it's really, really nice. But the reason why I'd like to make the suggestion to you guys to listen to classical music is you're listening to really, another thing, cymbals, the ones you play with your hand. And then, of course, you might even want to listen to some good symphonic marching bands, which are really cool too. It's all right. Now, what it has to do with is I'm not suggesting that you guys are going to ever play this kind of music, but by hearing the drum parts in these arrangements, some of these arrangements can be anywhere between 50 and 100, 200, 300 years old. I mean, this was like music that was written, the composers are long gone. And so by listening to that stuff, you were hearing percussion before the trap drums. So, it kind of gives you sort of perspective of different things. And I think if it wasn't for listening to a lot of the orchestral type stuff, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, they took some of those orchestral arrangements and modified them into a rock feel. They did it with Hoedown. I thought that was amazing. They did it with Jerusalem. They did it with Toccata. They did it with Pictures at an Exhibition. That was unbelievable. Peter Gunn. What was? There were a few other things also too that they did. And I remember right when Keith Emerson performed, he did the piano thing that I think was an actual composition, and it was really amazing. He performed it unbelievable. Keith Emerson was a great classical pianist as well as jazz and contemporary. So yeah, it's like kind of a cool thing. One last little thing. There's a book. It was written by Cyrone. I don't know his first name, but I think it was called Portraits in Rhythm, and it was built off of a lot of the rhythms of Stravinsky. But they weren't transcriptions, I think. They were more like written exercises. But they were in that style. I'm not exactly sure if they were or they weren't, but all I know, right, is just playing that stuff is unbelievable, because you have to get a very, very intense degree of accuracy in order to read that stuff. Plus, if you're reading that stuff, you really got to know what you're doing. You have to have a really good teacher to look over your shoulder to tell you if you're playing those figures right. I did that book with only one instructor. I never did the whole book, but I did little bits and pieces of it with the late great Ronnie Gould. And that was really fantastic. And my neck is hurting. A cramp in my neck. So anyway, listen to the classical percussion, and listen to classical music, and you'll get some ideas. For some people, you could find stuff that has a lot of percussion in it. That's really, really wild. And some of the modern composers have done some really amazing things. Another thing that I want to add to this, if you can get the recordings, they don't play this on the radio, but if you can get the soundtracks, there's always really a lot of good drumming and good percussion on certain soundtracks. It depends on who. One of my favorite soundtrack composers, Lalo, I can't pronounce his last name, Schifrin. He did the theme to Mission Impossible. But if you want to hear some amazing drumming, listen to Lalo's soundtrack on Dirty Harry. Now, I wouldn't recommend this to kids because it's a violent movie. Well, actually, wait a second. You can get the soundtrack. If you can get the soundtrack, you don't have to watch the movie. But if you're young, you don't want to watch that movie. It's not for kids. Brad Fiedel, unbelievable writer. He did, the Terminator movies. Don't hold me to that, but I think he did that. And those soundtracks are really, really cool. They have a lot of electronic percussion, a lot of real percussion. And finally, there's a soundtrack, I don't know if you can get this. Well, the soundtrack to Rocky was really good. Bill Conti, the original soundtrack for the first movie. Really good drumming on that. I don't know who did the drumming on that, but whoever did the drumming on that was a really, really good drummer. I really don't know who that was. Maybe it sounded a little like it could have been Harvey Mason, maybe, but I don't know. If you guys know, let me know. Or if anybody knows Bill Conti. He's a really cool, good composer. And finally, now this is funny, and I never got Mike to answer my question, but there was a soundtrack for Death Wish, the very first Death Wish. By the way, the second Death Wish, the soundtrack was done by Jimmy Page. That was pretty good too. But the first soundtrack was composed, performed, and penned by Herbie Hancock. I thought he did an amazing soundtrack. And the drums on that are so funky. And I think, and I never got an answer because when I had the pleasure to speak to Mike Clark, he didn't remember if he did it or he didn't. And the reason why is when Mike Clark was doing all those recordings, Mike Clark was Herbie Hancock's drummer in those early days. That's why I think it was him. I'm almost positive it was him, but I'll never know until Mike answered me. And he never really answered me. He didn't really know. because he did so many recordings back then that he couldn't recall. Those were the days when Mike did a lot of session work as well. But I think right, it was Mike. Well, whoever it was, right, it was funky. It was funky. It was really, really good. So, yeah, listen to that. And I think right that Mike Clark might have been on the Dirty Harry soundtracks, but I don't know. Some of the drumming around those soundtracks are really, really good. And, you know, soundtrack music for movies is a little bit different because they're not top 40 hits. They're music, right, that embellishes the movie. But sometimes there's some really, really good stuff. Finally, right, Keith Emerson did the soundtrack to a movie called Nighthawks, and then Stuart Copeland did the soundtrack to, I think, a movie called Rumblefish, and I'm sure he did a lot of other soundtracks, because Copeland, not only is he an amazing drummer, but he's a really pretty accomplished mallet player. He did the marimbas on there, and really, really cool. I think he gets more into that now, but I don't know the new things that he's done. That's pretty cool. Anyway, I'm done for the day. Thanks.